Kawe, Jaje Widache, Pauline Sharp. I just said to you in the Kanza language, hello, my name is Pauline Sharp. I'm a Kaw Nation citizen. We are the state from whom the state of Kansas took its name. I currently serve as the chair of the Kaw Heritage Society, and we are a nonprofit that works closely with Kaw Nation to help preserve history, culture, and sacred sites in Kansas. I've been active in the Native community here in Wichita since the 70s. In fact, I worked at the Mid-America All-Indian Center when it first opened in 1976. I wanted to reconnect with the Kaw people because my dad died when I was 14. He was the Kaw, and so I kind of lost contact with them. You know, I knew not a lot of Native people here, but not really Kaw people. So as soon as I retired, I joined the Kaw Cultural Committee. I took a class at Wichita State from Jerry Shaw, who was an Osage elder, and he taught Native American spirituality. I mean, he's been a friend of the Kaw Nation for, all his life. And at the end of his class, he's like, okay, how many people here know who the state of Kansas is named after? And nobody knew. Nobody knew that it's named after the Kaw or Kanza people and that we're still here. And I thought, oh my gosh, somebody needs to be sharing this. And of course, my husband would always say, well, if you don't tell the story, who's going to tell it? We were at some program on that at the Kaw Mission, and this woman rides in on a horse, and she gets off, and she's Calamity Jane. She goes into this performance, and she's like, everybody was captivated, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. So her name was Joyce Thayer, and she was a professor at Emporia State. And one time I told her, I said, I have a story to tell. She said, what's that? And I said, well, my grandmother was born in a teepee on the riverbank in Indian Territory in 1888. She was sent to Haskell Indian School, in 1901. And she was there for like 7 years. They sent her on her very first job to New York City. I was telling her this story. She says, oh my gosh, you have to tell that story. And so I went to one of their workshops and learned how to be a first-person historical performer. I never thought I could do it. I said, I'm a shy introvert. I can't do that. And she said, I am too. And she said, when you're performing, you're not you, you're her. And she said that makes all the difference. So I decided to try it, and I wrote the script, and I stumbled through it and decided I could do this. And so it went from there.
Hello, good to see you. I thought you were my husband John coming back from his walk. Did you hear we're moving? I'm looking forward to going back to Oklahoma and my Kaw people. So excited.
I call my performance Chief Lucy of the Kaw Indians, because that's what they called Lucy when she was elected chief. Later, I wanted to learn how to do the Loss of Turtle Island, which is an interactive program that you can have, like up to 100 people, and it goes through Indian policy and the Doctrine of Discovery and all of the policy that led to loss of culture and loss of land. And then at the end, you have like one blanket left and, a handful of people, and that's represents the Native population in the United States now. One of the women that was there, she said, yeah, I modified that to do it about the Kaw people, and I did it for my class. And she said, and at the end, I just, picked up the blanket and left because we're not here anymore. So I got involved with that, and when I was doing all that, one day I got a call from the director at Mennonite Central Committee, and she said, I have a retired Mennonite pastor. They have just sold some family land, and she wants to donate part of that income to the Kaw people. So she donated $10,000, and then her brother said, well, I'd like to match her donation. And so that got Kaw Heritage Society up and running. We got a call from an artist in Lawrence, Dave Lowenstein, and he was working on the People's Project. And he said, I'm kind of writing about little-known places in Lawrence. And he said, we have a rock here that it was sacred to the Kaw people at one time. And I said, yes. I said, that's all true. And I said, we would, I'd love to work on that project with you. And so we got a grant to start researching, and we gathered a group of people from Lawrence, professors and historians, and we started researching the history of the rock. And we would tell the story of the rock is a glacial erratic, and it was pushed down to Kansas by the last ice age. It ended up in the Kansas River at the juncture with Shunganunga Creek, and it sat there for hundreds of thousands of years. So the Kaw people at that time lived along the Kansas River when we first came to Kansas. So the Kaw people would go there and they would pray to Wakanda. I mean, they knew this rock wasn't supposed to be there and that it was special, and they would pray to the Creator and ask for the attributes of the rock to make us strong and resilient like the rock. Lawrence had taken it out of the river in 1929 and moved it to this little park in downtown called Robinson Park, and they put a plaque on it honoring the founders of Lawrence. And no mention of the Kaw people or that it was sacred to us. So it sat in that park for 95 years. We started telling this story, and the people in Lawrence are like, well, what does Kaw Nation want to do? So I went to Kaw Nation and presented there. That ended up with them asking for the rock to be returned to us. There was lots of discussion, like, what are we going to do? We're going to leave it where it is. We're going to put it back in the river. We're going to move it to Oklahoma. We decided to move it to Aligoahu Memorial Heritage Park. I said it needs to be with our people, so our people can learn our history and culture. We have built a new plaza, and we built an outdoor welcome center, and interpretive panels are being installed like this week. And so it's just finishing up. But we were able to move the rock a year ago and put it in place. And we had a few tribal members come up for that. I don't know where I heard the term first of rematriation, but when I looked it up, I Googled it, and it said it's a term Indigenous women use to talk about restoring balance to the earth. And I'm like, this is what we're doing. We're returning the rock to the people and to the land. I have grown, I feel like, since retirement. And in fact, this blanket, it's called Courage to Bloom, that they gave me when the rock was returned. I would tell my younger self to be a little bit braver, to not be so afraid. You have history and a story to tell, and don't be afraid to tell it.